All right, welcome everyone. We're Semblance to Sanity. I'm Caleb.
I'm Jacob.
And we're here for podcast number 6.
Yes. Dialogue.
Yes, dialogue, exactly.
Yeah.
One of the most fundamental aspects of storytelling.
Exactly.
In fact, you cannot have a story without dialogue unless there are no characters.
Or it's a silent film.
It's a silent film. That's true.
And you can't do that.
True.
It's
really
impressive
tough
when it's done well.
But it's impressive when you think about what amount of communication is done through the dialogue.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so before we go into that, we have some announcements.
That's right.
We have a new show that's coming this week. What is that show, Jacob?
That is Hype Q.
Hype Q, or otherwise known as Hype Q. That's true. Yeah, that's going to be replacing One Punch Man.
Right.
So that means, guys, sorry for those of you that are OVA fans. We're going to just watch them on our own time.
Yep.
If you have questions about them, just feel free to ask us.
Yeah.
But we're not going to do reactions for them.
But other than that, it's pretty basic.
Pretty basic. Yep.
Tuesday, Hunter x Hunter. Wednesdays, Psychopaths. Thursdays, Hunter x Hunter again. Fridays, My Hero Academia. Saturdays, RWBY Chibi and JoJo's.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, on Sunday, Hype Q.
Yep. All right, so that's a great setup. Guys, we wanted to give a special shout out to Stephen Long,
Yes.
who is an awesome Patreon supporter of ours. I want to thank you so much, dude.
Mm-hmm.
Your support
You're amazing.
means a lot.
The world.
Yes. So before we get into the storytelling and stuff, we did a little video prior to this.
We
that we
did.
want you guys to take a look at, right?
Yes, because we are doing a RWBY team-based card game.
Yeah, with a battle your own team combo focus against another team combo.
Awesome. But of course it's still in, the not quite done yet, but go check out that video where we talk about it. That way we can also hopefully get Rooster Teeth to pick up the idea.
Yeah, the link for the video will be in the description below.
Right.
But there are also instructions at the end of the video. It's only 4 minutes long.
Yeah. Super
with
short.
How we can potentially get Rooster Teeth's attention to see if they want to, at the very least, take a look at it.
Yeah.
Which would mean the world to us. So please, after this video is over, get a new tab, open up this video, and help us out. That would mean a lot.
It really would.
All right, so Jacob, dialogue.
Dialogue.
It's huge.
It is huge. Dialogue, if you do it well, you can take characters that aren't necessarily your favorites and make them awesome, right? Oh, you don't really need those. And I would say it's one of the things that, a lot of times people say, the character is the most important part, right?
Right.
But I feel like dialogue is the unsung hero of that.
Right.
Because you don't necessarily notice good dialogue. Sometimes you do when it's, really, really good.
When it's,
But then you only usually notice it when it's really bad.
It's kind of like music. So to an extent, dialogue is not background. It's forefront. It's right at the forefront. But you don't notice when it's awkward until it's really awkward.
Yeah.
And if you are a writer, you have a more proclivity to noticing the dialogue in particular. Because as any writer knows, dialogue writing is not easy.
Yeah, it'll sound one way in your head, but then
you write it out and it's completely different.
Yeah.
One of the things that's also very difficult is that writers tend to work solo until they bring an editor into the whole process. And dialogue is tough when you're writing for multiple characters because they can start to sound the same.
Mm-hmm.
That's a real problem that I have in particular is that I will make a bunch of interesting characters and then I'll start writing the dialogue for them. And suddenly the stoic scientist starts to sound a lot like the mad, crazy street performer.
Yep.
What? No,
it's really hard juggling that many different personalities in your head at once. You kind of have to wonder how people that are able to do that, where they find sanity.
You could say that they've lost all semblance of sanity. You just walked into it, though.
I did. I should just avoid that word entirely from now on.
Probably.
Yeah.
But on a note of dialogue, guys, one of the things that you can see really coming out of the dialogue is opportunity to drop things of foreshadowing of character development arcs. One of the things that dialogue is a clever way of doing is actually one of the most subtle ways you can provide exposition.
Yes, but that is a very big but.
Very big but.
You need to keep it subtle.
Very subtle.
There are more than a few shows that I've watched, usually anime, where they'll take a particular character, usually the kudere, and they will just start exposition dumping.
They're just
this monologue.
It's horrible.
Oh, it really kills the buzz. Like it's just, it can be bad.
Well, one of the ways you can think about it is if you have a character where you have to take everything they say as basically words coming from the author, you're doing something wrong as an author.
Right. Unless there's a reason for them to be that knowledgeable about things and to need to explain things to the other people.
Even with that setup, a lot of readers will see through that because it's so obvious and go, this is kind of lame. Like it's essentially lazy writing to do that.
Yeah.
So dialogue, another thing that I like to bring up a lot is dialogue is not monologuing.
Right.
Dialoguing is having multiple characters interacting through speech or some kind of what have you, communication. And a monologue is way easier to write than dialogue.
Yes.
One of the things you'll notice in a lot of, I would say, less than writing quality projects is you will notice people monologuing back and forth at each other.
Right.
Which is not dialogue. To an extent, actually, you could look at real-life relationships and stuff, and if you see people that essentially monologue back and forth to each other, they're not actually in a conversation.
There's not a lot of communication happening.
Or there's not really that much relationship happening. So, yeah.
You said it. Burn.
I said it. So, one of the things that we've learned in particular, just from writing dialogue and consuming so much good dialogue and also the bad dialogue, is noting kind of where you can have to juggle the perfect amount of kind of tension in a situation, but also move the story along. Because don't you feel sometimes dialogue kind of stops the story to
sometimes some and I would say like a lot of the times, more often than that actually, the creator is afraid that the dialogue will stop the story.
Sure.
So they don't do very much of it.
Yeah.
And because of that, a lot of the times in books, and sometimes they do this in anime too, you'll have that internal track of one of the characters, usually the main character, right?
Yeah.
And they'll basically use that as a substitute for dialogue because that way they can get the character to theorize about things and do all this stuff without actually like having there be that back and forth banter, which really is a lot of fun when it's done well.
Yeah, banter. That's a good word to bring up because dialogue has a lot of aspects to where you can get the audience to feel a certain way. It is like music again in that regard, in which you can subtly enforce the feeling of ominous kind of dread of some impending doom that's coming, or maybe the feelings of the character who's confessing their love to someone, or even the contempt as this one character is finding it so hard to deal with someone else's issues or what have you. And there's so many ways you can do that through just dialogue.
And here's one of the things that I would say is very, 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 very important. When you're making dialogue, whether it's in a visual medium like anime where you can actually like show their expressions and stuff, or in like a book, you need to make sure that the words are not the only thing that's being communicated. There was some statistic that like only 7% of communication is actually done through words, and the rest of it is like tone of voice, body language, things like that, context. So for really good dialogue, you've got to have that other flavor stuff in there too. If they're just sitting there talking, at best you'll think they're trying to save on like their animation budget if it's an anime, right? But at worst, it's immersion breaking. You don't feel like you're in a story because no one just sits there and talks without moving. That just doesn't happen unless of course you're a robot. So
and you can have robots in your story.
You can have robots in your story.
And Star Wars started off with just 2 robots being the only ones really talking for the first
Star
20
Wars
minutes.
Did okay, as far as like sales and stuff concerned.
That's a very good point. But another thing, Jacob, you and I have we're really fond of is we love that aspect of characters that have the melodrama dialogue stuff down pat, like it's perfect.
Yes,
like
absolutely.
The perfect types of melodrama is where you have characters who are all vastly different dialoguing with each other in such a way to where their natural kind of differences come forth in their dialogue and create conflict, struggle, and really good opportunities for them to learn from each other and evolve, grow, develop, and the like.
Yes, because I think we've said this before, but melodrama isn't inherently bad. It's
Correct.
usually bad, but the way it can be good is the fact that it's based solely on the characters themselves and their imperfections.
Right.
So if you're able to do it well, then it feels very real.
Right.
But if you don't, then it's just kind of a boring waste of time.
And that word real is actually a very good point, because when I've noticed a lot of reviewers and people who are just fans of certain things, you ask them, what is it about the characters in particular that you like? They just say, oh, they feel so real. They just feel so like they're right there, like they're actually real people. And I would say one of the ways,
one of the big ways,
probably the biggest way that they do this is having really good, proper dialogue that creates, to an extent, melodrama, because these characters are different enough from each other, because people are different from each other.
And it doesn't have to create melodrama. There doesn't necessarily need to be conflict, but it's a way for you to basically see the true nature of the characters.
Right.
Because even, it doesn't matter how awesome of a backstory you have or how awesome of a setting you have or whatever, in order to make these characters feel real, you need to see the relationships they have with other characters in the world and have those feel real.
Yes.
And if you can do that, then, it almost doesn't matter about the rest of the stuff. You'll sell your audience on it to some extent.
Also, and in another way, dialogue is one of the greatest ways to introduce story elements that will actually end up being the main plot or even just a side plot. There's ways that in the stuff that we're going to bring up, towards the end of this, that have really clever little plot devices that will get introduced subtly through dialogue in a way that could be considered exposition, but it's actually in a way more of setting up the pace for what this character's motivations, goals, and needs are, so that when they're brought into a situation where that stuff is relevant, it gets brought to the forefront, in its fullest form.
Yes. Now, do you want to start do you think we should go into the specific examples of stories with great dialogue?
I would say, yeah, you go with yours first.
Okay. So this is probably my favorite example of just great dialogue. Certainly in anime, at least.
And for those of you that are fans of us for a while now, you might know already what he's going to say.
But Black Lagoon. Now, first off, I'm just going to preface this with saying the dub specifically, the English dub for Black Lagoon. I know a lot of you dub haters might, cringe at this, but the dub for Black Lagoon, I swear, it is like one of the best dang dubs I've ever seen. It's amazing. I watched it in sub first, and then I watched it in dub later, so it wasn't like whichever one I saw first I liked more. I saw it in sub first, I rewatched it in dub, and it absolutely blew me away.
I can concur. The dub is fantastic.
It's awesome. A bit more swearing than the sub, but
that's what makes it better to an extent.
Yeah, it also makes it better because one of the things that really stood out to me the most about Black Lagoon is that they because it had themes of like morality and stuff like that, they would have these amazing scenes where there would be a lot of conflict behind it sometimes, but it would just be the two main characters talking about something, right? Usually relevant to the story in some way, and them as people. And it was so good. Like, everything from how they talked, like, everyone had their own style of speaking, like we were talking about earlier.
Yeah. Very different style.
There were different, like, bits of vernacular and stuff that showed where they came from and all that stuff, and just the kind of setting they were in. That was one of the things that the swearing did a lot. If it's in a setting where these people are basically, like, pirates and criminals and stuff like that. So, if they, throw around a few sometimes doesn't have bombs, it
in a minute
it fits, and this is another thing where I would say, now again, dub haters, don't crucify me for this, but sometimes you have a higher potential in the dialogue area, in the dialogue department, when it's in your native language, or at least the language you can understand.
Yeah.
Because I feel like the sub raises the min bar, right? Because if they mess up on something, it's harder to tell because you don't actually know what they're saying. You're reading the subtitles.
Yep.
But you don't get as much, like, say, timing with the dialogue.
Yep.
If say someone's cracking a joke, right? The timing might get messed up with the translation, and then
because you're like not only reading it, there's the time in which it's actually being heard.
Right.
So there's that cognitive dissonance as well.
Yes. Black Lagoon absolutely did not have that problem.
No, it didn't. And not at all.
No. Oh boy. And there were, so Black Lagoon is not a perfect show, but there were a lot of points where I would watch episodes, even though I didn't like the actual like plot type stuff that was going on. I would watch it just for these like sometimes just like 60-second bits of dialogue.
Yeah,
because they were so good. I absolutely loved them. I ended up just wishing that there was more of it.
Right.
And if you want like the prime example of Black Lagoon's dialogue, in my mind at least, there's a bunch of great conversations in there, but the second half of episode 7, the whole second half, the entire second half of an episode, like think about that for a second, is dialogue.
One big conversation.
Yep. That could have gone so wrong. Having characters just talking for that amount of time, like 50% of an episode, that's insane. But they did it, and they did it so well. It was so relevant. You knew this conversation was coming. It had been built up to. It brought out a lot of different emotions from the characters on both sides. It had a great resolution, and it totally set the pace and the tone for the story as a whole. I can recite that thing from memory. I must have listened to it like hundreds of times. I kid you not. It's so good. Not to overhype it, but
yeah. And from a fresher perspective, I'm not a huge fan of Black Lagoon.
Right.
But I can absolutely appreciate the dialogue, specifically within the dub, for not only that scene which he's talking about, but a couple other scenes as well, where you can tell that whoever was the writer for this, they really focus on making their characters sound unique, but sound like real people and not just characters. I would say maybe not just characters, but not just caricatures.
Sure.
So my story that I love to bring up is not an anime.
No.
And I want to bring this one up because I feel like, to an extent, it is the Black Lagoon of live action. It is the Cowboy Bebop of live action. Sure. It is the show that was canceled way too early. You know probably what it is now. It's Firefly, guys.
Yeah.
I want to just shout out this show from the rooftops for other reasons, as in addition to the dialogue. But this was a show that did dialogue right. And I wanted to point out a couple things in particular that it did uniquely that a bunch of other shows just don't do. So first, to give the setting, this is a sci-fi western, which already sounds like a nightmare in terms of like making it work story-wise. But we have so many unique characters thrust into a very kind of compact situation of storytelling. So they're all on a ship together, the Firefly. And I'm not going to go into really too many spoilers, but each character has essentially some kind of a past secret problem that they're going through that they allude to so subtly with every single point of dialogue. And that's a bit of an exaggeration, not every single point, but it's peppered throughout the show so perfectly. It's layered so well. It makes the show incredibly rewatchable. Ask any fan of Firefly, they'll tell you they've seen it multiple times through, and in particular they'll have their favorite episodes or 3 where they're like, oh yeah, that episode in particular, that one so good. But what they also did was they had a world where every character knows 2 languages primarily, right? Because the whole setting of this is 500 years in the future, and the 2 main languages are English and Mandarin Chinese. So what you have is these weird moments where everyone's we're from the US, everyone's speaking in English, and then one of them just will get really frustrated and they'll curse in a string of Chinese. I've talked to some of my friends who understood the Chinese, and it would make them laugh hysterically because these expletives were the most ridiculous things ever, like explosive elephant diarrhea. Like this is that type of a show where you are getting little just nuggets of golden dialogue here and there, and that's just the funny side of it right there.
Right.
Then you had the aspect that every single character was different. There are no carbon copies of the characters. No. Another thing I love to bring up is that the show gives a very diverse background of characters. You have the war veteran, you have the mercenary, you have the preacher, you have the doctor, you have the companion, you have the co-pilot, you have the
innocent country girl.
Yeah, the innocent country girl who's also a mechanic. You have River Tam. And I just don't want to say anything else. You have River Tam. I will say that this show deserves a dialogue note special just because of River. Just because of River. I'm not going to tell you anything about her character. Anything if you haven't seen this show. Watch Firefly just for River, and you will be happy that there's all this other stuff as well.
Right.
But also in particular, there are moments where you can see that there's a consistency.
Yes.
There are moments where the show puts them into really kind of weird settings where it goes full Western. Like, it goes hard full Western. And you're like, I thought this was a sci-fi. And then they pull out a weird gun, you're like, oh, okay, there's the sci-fi element. But they'll have that twang. They'll have that jargon that just seems a little bit old and antiquated. But it's delivered so well and so consistently well that you'll get lost in this world, and you'll want to go hang out with these characters.
And then you'll curse the skies and the heavens when you realize that there's only 14 episodes.
Yep. Also, in particular, I wanted to give a shout out for Joss Whedon, of course.
Yes.
He is the one that crafts this dialogue, and it is something that he is known for. And I would just want to say this is a little bit of pulling out of Firefly in particular, but find those storytellers that craft good dialogue, and you'll find good stories eventually attached to those people that write good dialogue.
Yeah.
Because not all of them are perfect or anything, but you will find that they create stories that you won't find anywhere else.
Yeah.
Because they're character-centric. And when I say character-centric, I mean like nothing you've ever seen before in terms of being character-centric.
Like, if you have good dialogue, because dialogue directly involves the characters.
Right.
So how can you have it
by
be
its
good
nature
if the characters themselves aren't good?
Right.
Like, if there's good dialogue, then the characters will be something special.
Yeah, and it's not like a straight up, like, obvious chicken to egg or egg to chicken situation. They kind of create each other in a way. Yeah. By having good dialogue, you have to have good characters. And by having good characters, you kind of have to have good dialogue. So it makes you really question what is good dialogue when you finally experience good dialogue. Because then you'll go back and go, oh. It will, in a sense, it will ruin you for regular dialogue. Will be kind of this thing of like, okay,
it'll
we're just kind of moving
kind
along.
Of bland.
Yeah, you'll get disappointed, but then you'll see moments where in the regular dialogue there'll be this moment of beauty, of art, and you'll be like, oh, that was beautiful. Like, please, let's encapsulate that and try and spread it all over the rest of this this story. So, Firefly, fantastic story. Disappointing conclusion in that it was canceled by Fox. So, yeah, they made a movie which I would say is not a satisfying conclusion for most people. But it is a conclusion, so it is more. And you get a lot of that awesome dialogue again.
Yes.
In particular, also, I want to say that a lot of main characters in storytelling, maybe not so much in anime, but in Western storytelling, kind of stuff that we get in the U.S. here, has a lot of kind of male-centric leads and stuff. And you can kind of predict their dialogue down to the pat at this point. It's so formulaic.
Yeah.
But with Firefly, it has a male lead with an almost equal cast of female characters to its male characters.
And its male lead is not traditional.
Not traditional, I would say. And to an extent, he's... I actually don't want to just harp on his character. Nathan Fillion does a very good job of his character. But the female characters actually feel like real characters,
real people.
And I'm not trying to say that, like, you know, male characters suck or anything like that, but we have a real problem, and this is an issue. There's a real problem with female characters not actually being legitimate characters.
Nope.
And some people think, oh, you're hating on female characters. Like, no, we want a higher standard brought up for female characters.
Because so often, and I understand this problem. There was a lot of time when I was like coming from the same place,
Sure.
is that when people design female characters, they will design them to be female characters rather than designing them to be characters who just so happen to be female.
Yep. Yep. So, Firefly, just wanted to say, is a great example of interpersonal dialogue with great female characters and great male characters.
Yep.
So, check it out for that as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, dialogue, in short, you can't really have a story without it.
And when it's good.
And when it's good, oh, it's so good. And as writers, we chase after stories with great dialogue.
Absolutely.
One, because this guy is clearly better than me at writing dialogue, so I in particular chase after it because I need to learn how to write better dialogue. It's just not easy. So it also gives you a little bit of, I would give you a little bit more patience with those that don't have the best dialogue. Their dialogue just, average.
Right.
Which is like, it's okay.
Which is good, because if dialogue, it's not good, but it's not bad.
Right.
It just sort of fades into the background, you know?
Like the music.
Yeah,
It's like if the music is doing its job, you won't notice it. It will just be there.
Exactly.
But when the music is amazing,
you'll play it on repeat.
Right.
For like hours.
It's like the You Say Run effect from My Hero Academia. My Hero Academia's soundtrack is great. It's good. But then there's every moment where You Say Run comes on and your whole body just gets energized and excited.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, to an extent, how in Black Lagoon, when RWBY is going off and having just this fantastic spout of dialogue between her and Rock, you go, this is so good. And it's how you can rewatch an episode of that just over and over and over again and get new things out of it every single time. So, yeah. Dialogue, guys. Don't underestimate it. And don't sweat it, I would say, too much if it's just average. But if you see something where the dialogue is getting a bit mediocre, maybe you should look somewhere else. And spread your vision out a little bit more and look for those stories with good dialogue.
And here's one great way to find it, especially when you're like writing a book or something.
Oh, sure.
If it's good dialogue, read it out loud.
Yes. You will find out very quickly.
You will.
It's a bit awkward the first time, but you'll find out rather quickly.
Don't worry about it. It's all part of the process.
Exactly. All right, guys, so we're going to move into the Q&A session of our video.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get into this. We have some awesome questions from users submitted from our last podcast video.
Right.
First ones, of course, Isotropy Anime.
You always give such great questions,
You always give fantastic questions, so thank you. The first question is, would you rather find your true love or a suitcase with $2 million inside?
This is pretty easy.
Okay, well, let's just say ours immediately, just so because... let's say this first, because it should be easy, but anyways. All right. 3, 2, 1.
$2 million.
God damn it! I knew you would say that.
Yeah. Well, see, okay. You'll find your true love eventually, but will you find a suitcase with $2 million eventually?
That's a good point.
Like,
to an extent, what if I already have found my true love, and I just don't know it? I would actually rather have the suitcase of $2 million. That's a good point. Yeah. All right, maybe. Next question. Would you rather know when you were going to die or how you were going to die?
When? I want to know how much time I have left to get stuff done.
Do you, though? Do you? Because if you do that, wouldn't that create a psychological effect where you would feel safe until then?
Possibly.
I actually don't want to know when I'm going to die. I want to leave that a mystery, but I would like to know how I'm going to die, because I can change that. I can't change when I'm going to die.
Well, okay,
most likely.
This is determining whether it's like fatalistic or something. Yes, granted, if it's how you're going to die and it's like a heart attack, then it's like, okay, you start eating healthier or something. Right? Do yoga or whatever. But with when you're going to die, like, I don't know, if you could change that, would you still know?
That's a good point. Yeah. So I'll choose how, though. You're going to choose when?
Yeah.
Okay. If you could see ghosts, would you tell anyone? Well...
We could tell each other, maybe.
Yeah, here's the thing. If we could both see ghosts, there would be a short list of people that I would first start to tell people. And I think, Jacob, you would be like number 2 or 3 on that list. So...
Sure. Because, you have to make sure that you're not going crazy, right?
Right. And that would be interesting, but I think to an extent... I'm not, like, really weird about this or anything, but But I think that there's things that we're potentially seeing we're just not really aware of because of
untapped brain potential and stuff.
Yeah, all that. All right, final question from Isotropy. Would you rather have an eagle which can fire laser beams from its eyes, or a polar bear which can fire rockets from its mouth?
So the big question here, now this is a very serious question. Would the polar bear run out of rockets? Because, see, laser beams, that's just energy. But rockets, that's an actual physical projectile.
We also don't know the strength of the laser beams.
Or the rockets. Are these like intercontinental like ballistic missiles or something? Or are they like...
No.
Like RPGs?
I think the idea is that we can choose maybe the types of rockets or laser beams. So I will choose eagle with laser beams because... there is more potential to be, I would say, a bear will get stopped on the ground. An eagle will just fly away.
Okay, so. That's good. That's a great point. So it would probably be eagle, but the reason why I would want to choose polar bear is because you can't ride an eagle. But you could ride a polar bear. And if it's firing rockets from its mouth, that would be...
Everyone's like, this is obviously photoshopped. Obviously photoshopped.
Yeah, see, there's no way that missile is actually coming out of its mouth right now.
Wow. Wow.
Great questions, Isotropy.
All right, Jomabe45 asks, if you were to create an anime, what would it be, and what would be your first 3 big decisions for it? Well, Jacob, I think this should go to you. This question in particular.
Okay. So, all right. Okay, I know what it would be. Mm-hmm. All right, this anime... would be about, I can't remember her name, but this was basically a lady in history around, like, the 16th century, I want to say.
The pirate.
The Chinese pirate lady. And I would basically use that as a retelling, like take that idea, use it as a retelling to get some sort of, like, Code Geass Breaking Bad kind of a thing where she ascends to power and, you know, also watches it crumble all around her, but, you know, being ruthless and badass and awesome.
Yeah. And then who would you, like, have you be the animation studio?
Animated by Madhouse, soundtrack by Hiroyuki Sawano, try and get some Crone, 2.0. And then, nice. If I could, I would want to get Colleen Clinkenbeard to play the main character.
Oh, nice. That'd be really awesome. All right, so next question. Have you ever watched an anime or show that you both have opposite opinions about? And if you have, what was it, and do you talk about it till now? So the answer, of course, is yes.
Yes, and yeah, I think you, like...
I might have mentioned it.
Well, I think we're both thinking of the same show, actually.
Are we? 3, 2, 1, ReZero. Oh, no, Haruhi more so than ReZero. Yeah, ReZero, I felt betrayed by the ending.
Right.
Just, so I eventually kind of lost...
How dare he love him?
Yes, but Haruhi is a thing where I didn't like it.
He did like it for parts, but the thing is...
But
the premise didn't grab him like it grabbed me.
Also...
And he hasn't seen the Disappearance
Also, I haven't seen the Disappearance of Haruhi Suzumiya movie.
Right.
So, we do talk about it, but also it's a thing where I just kind of shut it down because I just don't care to talk about it.
Right, and I just, sort of try to get him to watch the Disappearance movie, but at the same time I don't want to pressure him about it because then he'll never watch it. And,
yeah.
And yada,
so
yada,
that's
yada.
probably one of those very polar opposite ones because it's like Jacob's like top
one of my
3
favorites,
favorite animes of all time.
It actually ties into one of these other questions that we'll be able to talk about later.
Okay.
So who or what are your idols or inspirations for life? What impact do they have in your life? Can be a show, book, anime, anything.
Well, a lot of things. I would say in particular, I looked up a lot to, in terms of people, I've always been very fascinated by kind of people that took like risks at a young age and stuff. So I would say, I don't know, it's tough because there's some people in my life that I personally know and I don't feel comfortable necessarily giving names out for them, but there were a couple people in my life who took a lot of risks young, and I really shaped a lot of my life around those people. I would say my grandpa is a very big inspiration in my life. He really helped me really take seriously a lot of areas in the kind of the business sphere of things. But then also in particular, I'm a huge Elon Musk fan.
Oh yeah.
And this is more recent, of course. So that guy is a real life Tony Stark, and he doesn't have the ridiculous ego. So
right.
If you don't know who Elon Musk is, go Google the guy and just look and see like what crazy things have been done.
He has a biography, and it's incredible. For me, I would say there are a few. Tolkien / Lord of the Rings. I absolutely love stories.
That was huge for me too.
Tolkien and Lewis, C.S. Lewis, with Chronicles of Narnia. Those are like the two stories that I grew up on.
Yeah.
And those were the main. And because I read them so early, I read them before, like Harry Potter and things like that. I ended up getting very dissatisfied with other stories later on, and that's where the original idea to write my own stories came from. Because I was like, let's improve this.
Right.
And then that sort of leads into the next one. Christopher Paolini, he did the Aragon Inheritance, series, because he started writing Aragon when he was 15, finished by 19, and even though the movie was absolute shite, he got a movie made out of it. Yeah. Like, even though it was a ripoff of Lord of the Rings and Star Wars, like.
Yeah, his books weren't even that good. It was the fact that he did all this at such a young age.
And granted, like, both his parents, I think, were in the publishing industry.
Yeah, it made it a lot easier.
But it was one of those things where it told me, like, hey, you can do this too. Mm-hmm. And that was huge. Huge.
Yeah, that kind of stuff is always big. So we've got Hugo XG, of course, always asking awesome questions. Do you guys think CGI replacing hand-drawn animation is a bad idea altogether, or do you think it's better to give it a chance to develop and become as good eventually, or is that a fruitless effort?
So I'm going to say flat out that it is not a fruitless effort, because we have seen Psycho-Pass, and every time those Dominators transform...
That's good CGI. Yeah, so one of the things that I've noticed is that I tend to avoid CGI heavy shows with regards to animation, like animated shows and stuff like that have heavy CGI elements. But then it's not actually that I avoid those; it's that I avoid the ones where they mix them. And the thing is that mixing is really hard to do. But I have seen a couple CGI shows, like RWBY, for instance, where I am blown away by the animation quality of some of those fights in RWBY. Yeah. They're astounding. They're incredible. Yeah. So I would say they both have their place and is not a fruitless effort. But I would say that I think we need to be patient with it.
Yes.
A lot more than we are right now.
Right. And one other thing I want to say, just because CG is on the discussion table.
Right.
Berserker from Fate Zero was absolutely amazing. That was like probably the best CG decision I have ever seen. Ever. Like,
yes. Okay, so those of you that are fans of the Fate series have obviously all watched Fate Zero, because it's considered by many to be the best show of the ones there. And in there's a character, Berserker,
and the whole show is like 2D, right?
Right. The whole show is 2D, except for this one character who has this kind of smoky, ethereal,
towering
effect.
Armor, and it's
really good. We don't want to spoil the story, but I will tell you there's a scene where this character's power is that whatever he kind of touches, he kind of takes over and controls. He takes over a fighter jet and extends this kind of effect power to it, and it's beautiful. It's glorious. So watch the show if you haven't. But particularly maybe if you have, go and just rewatch that scene, because it's beautiful.
So
1080p HD everything.
Can absolutely be amazing, or even better than 2D.
Absolutely.
It just doesn't happen very often.
It doesn't happen very often. Yeah. Okay, so we've got a scenario.
Right.
You go CGX3. Yep. You can live in the world of any of your favorite anime, but you'll be on the side of villains. Which anime world would you choose and why?
No contest.
Yep. Well, the thing is, you said favorite anime, but screw the rules. We're picking Avatar Last Airbender. Yep. If we would be
we can meet Iroh and Zuko.
Yeah, if we would be on the side of villains, it would be interesting, because
we don't have to stay there.
We don't have to stay there, but not only that, the Fire Nation as a whole was under a huge amount of propaganda. Massive amount.
Absolutely.
And it would be interesting to be in that world where we believe that everyone else needs to experience the culture of our world.
Right.
But then we go out and travel eventually and find we're not that great. Maybe we're the bad guys. There's that potential for us to have our own little redemption arc. So... and also we get to Firebend, maybe. Would be fantastic.
And get to meet Zuko and Iroh.
And Zuko and Iroh, maybe. That'd be
and I would also
cool
kind of like to meet Azula.
Another question from the same guy. Do you guys have a favorite anime character type that you love, in spite knowing that in real life you would hate a person like that, or a relationship with the type would be horrible and better avoided?
So you're basically just talking about tsunderes, right?
Yes.
I mean, unless you're also talking about yanderes, but that's a whole nother discussion.
No yanderes, please.
But yeah, you're basically talking about tsunderes.
This guy likes tsunderes in general, specific tsundere characters.
Okay,
like Toradora,
Black Lagoon, Haruhi. I also love the grumpy old man tsundere. Like, I love it. I love it when characters are made to be characters. They're not just made to be the trope. I hate it when there's the random girl in some anime that's there specifically to be a tsundere and beat up the main character for no reason, and everyone treats it like it's completely normal.
Yep.
I don't like that. Yep. Thankfully, in Haruhi, Black Lagoon, and Toradora, while that happens, it is not treated as normal.
Right.
It's very much treated as abnormal.
Yes. I would say that I would just have to agree with him about the grumpy old man syndrome. I really like that character, but I don't think a relationship with one of those would be avoided. I just think it would be difficult for me, because I don't think they would last long in that trope with my just natural charm. I would eventually ruin that stubborn.
Although we kind of did know somebody that we actually pegged as being sort of one of those, like, basically a tsundere that just, non-violent, of course.
Right.
And they are one of our best friends. After we got past that rough tsundere exterior or whatever, there was no going back. They're one of the most fun people to hang out with out there. And whenever we see
really
people
funny.
that don't realize that, it's.
So to an extent, that's why maybe I wouldn't pick tsundere.
But I mean, what else would you pick?
Yeah. That's a good point, yeah. So Adib Liao asks, if you could choose one teacher and one student from My Hero Academia to form the dynamic duo, who would it be? Oh, I already know. Do you want me to take this before, or do you want to take...
Well, I mean, there's the obvious one.
Well, see... I said this in one of our reactions.
Aizawa and Shinso?
Oh, dang it. Yeah, that was it. Yeah. Aizawa and Shinso, guys.
That would be...
It's perfect. It's perfect.
That would be so good.
I mean, this better be a thing, later in the manga.
I seriously hope so. Don't tell us, of course.
Don't tell us, but
yeah,
I really want that to be a thing. I also... here's the other thing. I also kind of like the idea of kind of the Aizawa character basically pairing up with specific students that kind of need his stern hand, so to speak. And I would also like a couple characters that are more in the, not the trauma stages, but characters like Todoroki,
sure,
where it's okay, Todoroki and Aizawa, for instance, they don't pair up well at all.
But Todoroki and All Might.
No, I'm saying that Aizawa would go pretty well with someone like that. So maybe if there was a student that we knew more backstory about, that was dealing with just stuff.
I think Aizawa and Bakugo would actually be a great...
I don't think so.
Well, okay.
Yeah.
It could potentially, but I don't know.
I just don't think that's Bakugo. I think Bakugo
sure
hasn't had really any kind of past trauma stuff. It's more of the... Yeah, just his character just having a unique situation. I don't know.
One thing to point out, though, is that we don't actually know all that many teachers in MHA yet.
That's a good point.
And we don't know, and there are some, but we don't know a whole lot about them, like Midnight or Cementos.
Right, and they're not technically teachers. They're they're just pro heroes.
I'm not sure. Yeah, right.
Like the principal,
we don't know anything.
We know more about him as a... Well, no, we know more about him than we know about someone who's a pro hero that showed up at USJ, Gun McCree.
Yeah,
guy. We would love to have, if anything, more backstory, kind of like what they showed with Present Mike and Aizawa at the names choosing thing.
Okay. Actually,
Present Mike
and Headphone Jack.
Oh, that would be fun. That would be fun.
Yeah.
I think that they would provide that kind of that sonic, sound group. Maybe they could throw sweet rave parties. I don't know. All right, so next question we have from Dave L. Would you rather miss the next 10 years of your life, or your life would go on, but you still have forgotten about it, or have to relive the last 10 years of life, so you have to accomplish everything again and overcome the hardships you faced in the past once more.
No contest.
Yeah, that's no contest.
Yeah,
I would
relive
relive
the past 10 years. Yeah,
and I know that would be tough in the sense that you would be. It would be going through that struggle again, and it would feel really rough. And
in a way, I think that'd be a great experience. Like,
right, but the question is, in reliving it, do we know that we're reliving it?
And if we don't know that we're reliving it, then obviously we choose that one because we wouldn't know we're reliving it.
Well, yeah, but either way, it's different based on whether or not we know we're reliving it.
Right, but we would know afterwards whether we can't remember the last 10 years of our life.
Exactly. So I don't want to miss time. That's one of the things that, as I'm growing older, I don't know, I'm 26, I'm not old, but...
We're going through our midlife crisis.
Yeah, exactly. Now. YouTube and all that. But the idea of losing time...
Yeah,
that's just terrifying.
Yep.
I could never choose the other one.
Okay, UXGC... Again, do you guys think you can write a good romance story with a taboo love at the center?
Ha! How taboo?
Well, yeah, how taboo? Well, okay, so there was more to this question, and he was basically saying, okay, with something like Boku no Pico, he's like, now, hold on, okay. He's like, but is it possible to actually have there be a story with something like that and make it be good? So that is a very tough question to answer, but I want to answer it because it's tough.
Here's the thing where it can be good. You can have a good story and not a good romance.
That's true.
Here's a way that you could do this. Let's say you have taboo love. Mm-hmm. I actually heard about this story where they have someone who really loves someone that's like a serial killer / like really like dominating, manipulative, abusive person. And the story is really good from the person who was telling me about it because of the dynamic of the two characters. But the love romance part of it is really sick and twisted because of the taboo-ness about it.
And the thing is that, so it can absolutely be done, but first impressions are very important, and a lot of times someone's enjoyment of a story will be based largely on the mindset they have going into it. If you have something that's taboo, the whole point of taboo is that it rubs people the wrong way. They don't like the idea, right?
Or not only that, it kind of maybe tickles the fancy of like, ooh, taboo, and then they go, I want to get into this even more.
Sure, that's the whole point of like yaoi and
50 Shades of Grey.
Yeah, exactly, right.
Yeah. So here's an example of where it's probably not done well. I've never read any 50 Shades of Grey. Not even ironically. Hey, that might be a dumb idea to do in the channel, do like dumb readings. But 50 Shades of Grey, bad. It's just bad. I think everyone generally agrees on that who's done any writing. 50 Shades of Grey is not a great story. But they took a taboo-ish, it's not really taboo, but it's like pseudo-taboo story and made
taboo
it popular.
Changes with time.
Yeah, exactly. That's another good point. Okay, so I would say I couldn't write a good romance story with taboo love at the center.
I don't know if I could either. But it definitely can be done. You just have to get creative with it.
Yeah. So, Boop Brip asks, do you guys like revenge stories that become a larger narrative in a story like I want to avenge my mom's death to the whole world is at risk from the threat to kill my mother? That's Attack on Titan.
Right.
I love you too, by the way. Hey, thanks, man. Appreciate it.
So,
whoever you are.
I would say this is it's too simple of a question because it's saying, do you like revenge stories that do this or do you like revenge stories that do this? In general, I would say I don't really like revenge stories because they tend to be overused. So, in general, as a whole, if it's a revenge story, I probably won't be very interested. But revenge stories can be done very well. Our previous podcast was all about great revenge stories. So
that makes sense that you would bring this up. With that being said, revenge stories that go somewhere, I think, like we mentioned in that previous podcast, revenge is a great hook.
Yes.
But having it followed up relatively well after the hook, just requires some decent execution. If they can do that well, then I do like it. I don't love it necessarily, but I do like those stories.
If you're dealing with a longer story, you generally will want there to be some hook onto something bigger.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, it's like where's the meat, right?
Right. Where will it go from here?
Why isn't it condensed into just one book instead of 3 or something like that?
Exactly. All right. So we've got Clash asking if you could choose while watching or reading something, would you rather the story play out like you think it should, and what would be the most satisfying ending? Or would you like the story to surprise you and 50% of the time be disappointing, but the other 50% exceed your expectations.
Why don't you answer first?
Oh, man.
I mean, I think I know what your answer is. You're going to say the first one, right?
No, I'm going to say the second one.
Oh,
yeah.
Really?
One of the things that I've noticed in speculating for stories in particular is that I like to speculate to the point to where I predict enough things that I am on the thread of where this writer is taking the story.
Sure. Okay.
But I like being surprised. And I would say that there's a lot of shock value that comes from being surprised if you're an analytic like me or Jacob.
Sure.
Like we rarely get fully surprised by storytelling. The most recent episode of JoJo's, the one that's on early access for Patreon, the third episode, that surprised us. That's
and
a very special thing. And I would say
expectations.
that JoJo's seems like that will be one of those stories where it will be surprising us like plenty of times, but about half the time it might be a little bit mediocre. But then the other half, it's going to completely exceed our expectations. So
okay, yeah.
I like that dynamic, and I'm maybe more and more getting used to it as I experience more stories.
Interesting. So this basically spells out one of my favorite shows that I mentioned earlier in this video.
Oh.
Haruhi.
Yeah.
Because Haruhi has this thing called Endless 8, where the characters get stuck in a time loop. So they repeat the same episode 8 times with very, very, very slight differences. They reanimate the whole thing, but everyone's saying the same thing. It drove most of the fans crazy.
Because it
with
should.
good reason. Yeah, it should. It absolutely should. I don't know why they did it, but they did it.
Yeah.
And then there was another episode, Someday in the Rain, where it basically shows one of the characters pretty much just reading alone in a room for like 3 minutes at a time. Like,
so entertaining.
Yeah, so entertaining. That's actually one of my favorite episodes because it's something that happens later. But I love that show. I absolutely love it. Even with all the flaws, because there are a lot of points where it's just goes from like being not that great to like they got creative with this. Like, wow. Like, how did they manage to make it this bad? But then there are those times where you're like, where I will literally be spending 3 months and my mind is spinning just from one thing that I saw in there.
Right.
And it's absolutely just perpetually blowing my mind and I can't believe it.
Right.
And
so you would rather have the second one as well because of the infinite capacity of something that exceeds your expectations.
Yeah, but it's basically
it's easy to be disappointed.
It's easy to be disappointed, but
there's no limit to something that exceeds your expectations.
But it does depend on how much it exceeds your expectations.
Right. So in orders of magnitude, exceeding expectations just means it's above.
Right.
But disappointment goes just down to 0.
Exactly.
There's nothing, like, you don't go into hate before disappointment. It's like...
Yeah, this might seem like a silly analogy, but if someone offered you 1,000 cookies that you knew were going to be really, really good, right? That would be pretty cool.
Right.
If someone offered you 2 cookies, one of which would be terrible, and the other one would be the best cookie you'd ever eaten, you'd probably choose the 2 cookies just because you wanted to know, like, what would the best cookie I could possibly eat taste like?
Right. To an extent, this is where Jacob and I actually like to differ on a lot of things. This is why he thought I would pick the first one.
Right.
Is that the stories where people excuse aspects of the story's weaknesses because of the benefits.
That's not something you should have to do.
It's not something you should have to do.
Yeah.
And what I'm quite tired of, unfortunately, is, especially in Western television in particular, is a lot of excuses being made for extremely bad formulaic storytelling because the premise is slightly cool. It's a different twist.
And
on
you still
something.
see that in anime. It's like
anime is
transported
really bad
to a
at this
fantasy
as well.
world with a smartphone.
That's maybe why actually ReZero is something to where we actually got into a little bit of a dispute about that. I mean, this is a little bit of a tangent here, but I actually liked a lot of ReZero. I did. Yeah. I really enjoyed a lot of it. I despised everything after like a certain point in the story.
Right.
And most people know where that point is if you've watched ReZero. But it's weird to go back on it and say, like, okay, now what do I actually think about it, you know, in terms of the whole picture? It's hard to say I liked it because of how bad certain parts were. The parts that exceeded my expectations exceeded it by this much. But the parts where I was disappointed were more, and they were more frequent, and they were larger disappointments than those that exceeded my expectations.
So it didn't outweigh it. Right.
Exactly. It's a balance thing.
Right.
So to an extent, you can actually have a show with flaws. Like, pretty decent-sized flaws.
All stories do have flaws. There is no such thing as the objectively perfect story.
Exactly. So, you know, we have our own biases and stuff, so we put extra value to those disappointments or, you know, positives. And as long as the positives outweigh the negatives by a large enough amount, you will say that you love that story.
And and I would say that's the reason why I love, say, Haruhi so much, and Caleb doesn't, because the stuff that I love, I absolutely love it. Like, I haven't seen stuff like that before, and it's this pearl of great price it's just amazing, right? And I'm so happy that it exists. But, you know, there's that really bad stuff, and if Caleb doesn't say value the good stuff as much as I do, which is understandable, then he's gonna be like, Jacob,
yeah, this is killing me, bro. Why are we doing this? Please stop.
One day maybe.
But that being said, storytelling in particular really does come down to the core set of things, and we have all these other bits that kind of make it, you know, important and stuff. But, like, even just kind of what we've been talking about in the Q&A stuff, dialogue, you can sum up entire stories just in that transition point to where the good dialogue enters.
Yep.
Like, and I just wanted to bring that up before we ended this.
One other shout out. The show Spice and Wolf. You haven't seen this, but it's a very slow and relaxing show.
Yeah.
But the biggest draw to it, like sometimes it relies on this completely, is the dialogue between the two main characters.
That's a good
point.
In
the dub.
That's a good point. From what I've heard of it, you know, that kind of traveling from town to town aspect, you get kind of nothing more than the dialogue and interaction between the two characters. A show I want to shout out that's not as, I would say, dialogue heavy, but the dialogue in particular is really good. Also, it has almost a near perfect dub, is a Bacano.
Yes.
Bacano has a fantastic dub, and the dialogue is incredible because it's in that 1920s kind of prohibition era with
it actually sounds like you're in America during that time. Like,
yeah, it's quite good.
Yeah.
And also the dialogue between Isaac and Miria is gold.
Oh yes.
If you've seen this show, you know why Isaac and Miria was brought up as like
they have got to be like
other characters.
The best dedicated comic relief set of characters I've ever seen.
Yeah, it's quite something. All right, guys. Well, that comes to the end of our podcast. Leave your questions in the comments for our future podcast, and we'll see you again next time. But until then, we're Semblance of Sanity. I'm Caleb.
I'm Jacob.
And we'll see you all next time.